Hi, I'm Micah Halpern. Thank you for joining me today as I do some thinking out loud. Our first segment is called Background Briefing. The first thing I've been thinking about is the trial of Nazi war criminals and how important it is to bring them to justice, even if they are very old, even if they're 100 years old. There's no statute of limitations on murder, all the much more so in the case of mass murder. Gregor Formanek is 100 years old. Formanek was charged with aiding and abetting in the murder of 3,322 people at Sachsenhausen concentration camp in Germany, near Berlin. The German appeals court determined that he is fit to stand trial in his role in the mass murder of Jews in Germany. Earlier, a lower court in Germany ruled that as then 99-year-old, he was, quote, permanently incapable of standing trial, unquote. They were overruled. Yet there are some essential questions to ask about this. There is no age limit for murder. In most jurisdictions, when a heinous murder is committed, even by a minor, they are often tried as an adult. The question in most democratic legal systems is identical. The question is the same regardless of jurisdictions. It doesn't matter if it's federal or state, in the United States or Canada, Germany or Israel. In order for a person to stand trial in a criminal case, they must be able to aid in their own defense. If they cannot assist, then they cannot be tried. That applies to the sanity plea, let's say, for instance. It does not matter how horrific the crime is. As you can imagine, this often becomes a battle of psychologists and psychiatrists. In the case of Gregor Formanek, a lower German court ruled him incapable, but a higher court ruled he was capable and kicked the case back down to the criminal courts to be tried. We are well acquainted with the age versus clarity question that plagued the US presidential election. There's no question about that. It is no different here. Age does not matter, just one's capability. There are people in their 90s who function intellectually as well as their young counterparts. In this case, there are very important legal and philosophical issues at stake. People who perpetrate evil acts and acts against humanity need to be held accountable no matter the passage of time. The information and historical reality needs to be read into the court record as facts that occurred, not as events that are open to interpretation or even denied, as some people do with the Holocaust. The victims and perpetrators are numbering fewer and fewer. This is one of the most important reasons for this trial to continue. These trials must be covered in the media, not just in the traditional media, but also in the new media as well, in the social media, so that young people will learn that the Holocaust actually happened. Study after study show that young adults have less and less knowledge about the Holocaust and more think that it never happened. That Jews made up the Holocaust to justify the creation of the State of Israel and the oppression of the Palestinians. People think that. The very first Nazi war trials, both under the Soviets and in the international community, as in the Nuremberg trials, had one major goal. The primary goal was not justice, although that was an important, and the judicial system was the best vehicle. The goal was to put into the record what happened. Gregor Formanek does not deny that he was a member of the SS in Sachsenhausen. The Russians already convicted him and sentenced him to 25 years, although he was released after 10. His guilt is not actually something in question right now. In 1960, Israel discovered that Adolf Eichmann was living on Garibaldi Street in Buenos Aires, Argentina. Israel's Prime Minister, David Ben-Gurion, sent a team of 8 to capture Eichmann and bring him to Israel to stand trial for his role in transporting Jews to their death during the Holocaust. Gideon Hausner prosecuted the case for Israel. The transcript was over 3,500 pages. The trial took 56 days. There were 112 witnesses. Only 14 of those witnesses actually saw Eichmann during the Holocaust. Gideon Hausner, ignored recommendations to call only 30 witnesses. Make it short, they told him. No, Hausner wanted to produce a comprehensive historical legal record of the Holocaust. Eichmann's personal notes were admitted into evidence, as well as his lack of contrition, that is, he was not sorry. Eichmann's defense was similar to those at the Nuremberg trials in 1945 and 1946. Their defense was that they were following orders and doing their jobs. They were but cogs in a wheel, having sworn allegiance to Hitler. Hausner was correct, as was Hannah Arendt. Arendt was a world-renowned social and political philosopher who covered the Eichmann trial for The New Yorker. Her coverage became the monumental work, Eichmann in Jerusalem, a report on the banality of evil. Arendt coined the expression, the banality of evil. While watching the trial, she observed Eichmann, and Arendt concluded that Eichmann was neither a sociopath nor a fanatic. If anything, Eichmann was boring and humdrum. He went about doing his job, and his job was murdering the Jews of Europe. He did not care one way or the other about the Jews. He was just doing his job. It was Hitler's law. These lessons cannot be forgotten. Just like Gideon Hausner and Hannah Arendt recorded what happened, we must also record. If there are still Nazi SS members who participated in the murder process, if they're still alive and functioning, they must be brought to trial for the historical record and for the next generation to understand. Coming up next, points of view. First up is an editorial from the Jerusalem Post. It was published on December 8th, 2024. It's entitled Syria's Collapse, an Opportunity and a Risk for Israel. Editorial subtitled, With Syrian rebel forces rapidly advancing south toward Damascus after already taking Aleppo and Hama, the ground in Syria is shifting. This is how the editors begin. The fall of Assad, an implacable foe of Israel, who turned Syria into a staging ground for Iranian threats and weapons transfers to Hezbollah, is not something Israel would lament. With Syrian rebel forces rapidly advancing south towards Damascus, after already taking Aleppo and Hama, the ground in Syria is shifting. This shift is due in no small measure to the twin blows Israel dealt Hezbollah and Iran since the launch of Operation Northern Arrows in mid-September, aimed at returning displaced Israeli residents to their homes along the northern border. In its war in Lebanon, Israel decapitated Hezbollah's leadership, killed and wounded thousands of its fighters, and significantly degraded its missile and rocket capabilities. Hezbollah, which once fought in Syria to prop up the dictatorial regime of President Bashar al-Assad, is in no position to help Assad today, as his regime has crumbled. Nor, for that matter, is Iran, Assad's chief backer, alongside Russia. This was an excellent editorial, short and true and to the point. Israel set the groundwork for the success of the rebels and ousting of Assad. Israel pounded away at Hezbollah in Lebanon and Syria, and that allowed for Assad to be toppled. Next up is a column by Leo D. It was published also on December 8th in Jerusalem Post, and it's entitled, To Wage My Small War Against Palestinian Terror, I Am Suing the PA for 50 million shekels, new Israeli shekels. Opinion and subtitled, For 30 years since Yasser Arafat took power in 1994, the PA has been supporting terror against innocent Jews around the world. Before I begin, I must remind you that the writers, that is Leo D., his wife Lucy, and daughters Maya and Rina were murdered in a terror attack in the Jordan Valley in April of 2023. This column is personal, and it is heart-wrenching. This is how D begins. On April 6, 2023, CNN's headline read, Israeli police storm Al-Aqsa Mosque, referring to the IDF operation to disarm the terrorists that were storing weapons in that holy building. The following day, the next Palestinian operation to obliterate all Jews from Israel and beyond began with the murder of my wife Lucy and daughters Maya and Rina in the terror attack in the Jordan Valley. This was the beginning of the Arab war against the Jewish people that would later be named as the Al-Aqsa Storm. D goes on to explain what Hamas really is in the context of Palestinian life. He clearly shows that the PA pays the terrorists and pays Hamas. He continues, the Hamas terrorists that gunned down these three beautiful, kind women in the prime of their lives would later be eliminated by the IDF, but their families continued to receive thousands of dollars per month in compensation from the Palestinian Authority, the ruling government of the Arabs living in Judea and Samaria. We have been led to believe that Hamas is the main extreme Palestinian political and military force, and that it operates exclusively in Gaza. This is not the full picture. In fact, the Pay for Slay Martyrs Fund that compensates terrorist spouses and children to the tune of over $350 million per year using UK and US and European taxpayers' money is funded by the PA, and the supposedly democratically elected organization that is recognized as governing the areas of the West Bank, including in Ramallah, Bethlehem, and Jericho. D explains that the PA pay terrorists to attack Jews. He breaks down for us the dollars and cents of the money and how the PA sponsors the terror. He writes, the PA received $40 billion in international aid during this time, with around 20% of this money going directly funding their Foundation for the Care of Families of Martyrs, the largest terrorist incentive scheme in the world. Another portion funds terror training of Palestinian youth in UNRWA schools throughout the region. Now D further explains the very strange situation where the terrorists are actually funded by Western democracies like the United States and Great Britain. He writes, approximately 33% of the aid given to the PA is donated by European governments, and over 15% comes from the United States government. In 2023 alone, the UK donated £100 million to support this terror funding scheme and its collaborators. To further understand the complexity of this, D asks the British ambassador if his family is entitled money from the Terror Victims Fund, sponsored by England, and the answer was no. He writes, it is bizarre that taxpayers in democratic Western countries do not seem to care how their international aid money is spent. But I have discovered that there is a limit to who they will pay. A few months after our tragedy, I spoke to the British ambassador in Tel Aviv and asked whether my family would be eligible for any compensation from the British Terror Victim Fund. The answer was a resounding no, based on the fact that we had lived outside of the UK for more than 5 years. Apparently, whilst happily funding foreign terrorists, the British taxpayers' generosity stopped short at compensating British victims of that same terror. D has a plan to stop the funding of terror in the PA. He wants to sue them. He wants to sue them in Israel. This is what he plans to do, and he writes it out. In order to wage my small war against Palestinian terror, I have chosen to sue the PA for 50 million shekel under a new compensation law that was recently passed in Israel. Because Israel withholds millions of shekels of PA money through its collection of sales taxes from the Palestinian goods sold on their behalf, this money can be awarded legally as damages to terror victims by any Israeli court. If 1,000 families of terror victims in Israel were to sue the PA, we could collectively bankrupt the Palestinian government and end their terror funding scheme once and for all. D now concludes by writing the following. Alongside our agreed goal of destroying Hamas, we need to encourage world governments to stop their funding of Palestinian terrorism through their aid to the PA and challenge their support for UNRWA. This is a very ambitious goal. For his sake, I hope that it comes to fruition. Coming up, commentary through cartoons, where pictures tell the story. I'm going to show you 6 cartoons today. In this first cartoon is from London. We see a table dripping with blood. Seated around the table are a Westerner and an Arab. It is entitled Gaza Talks, Hamas-Israel-Cairo Negotiations, Blood. The table is dripping with blood. The cartoonist is blaming everyone, Arabs and Westerners, Israel, the United States, and everyone else. The second cartoon is also from London. It's entitled Syria Crisis, Assad Opposition, Militia, Aleppo Abyss. It shows a civil war fighting one another in the very same truck in Syria. This third cartoon is awful. It's entitled Gaza Genocide. It depicts an Israeli bulldozer pushing Palestinians over a cliff. It's just a terrible commentary. Fourth up is another cartoon about this ex-Syrian leader, Assad. The cartoonist is comparing Assad to Gaddafi and Saddam Hussein. In the cartoonist's eyes, Assad is soon to be killed or executed, just like Gaddafi and Hussein. Fifth up is a cartoon entitled Bashar Assad, Syria dictator leaving Damascus trash. Assad is boarding a helicopter, which is actually a green garbage can. Assad is leaving Syria and taking the garbage with him. In other words, Assad is the garbage. Finally, the sixth cartoon shows Assad in the rubber boat, all alone, and the caption reads, Syrian refugee. The humor here is irony. The cartoon is tinged with irony because of the civil war that attempted to oust Assad way back in 2011, a huge refugee crisis emerged in Europe. Now today in 2024, Assad is the refugee. In a moment, more of my own perspective and a few predictions. U.S. President-elect Donald Trump addressed the fall of Assad and his regime in a post on his social network, Truth Social, which he owns. He wrote, Assad is gone. He left his country. He wrote, his protector, Russia, led by Vladimir Putin, was not interested in protecting him any longer. Russia had no reason to be there in the first place. They lost all interest in Syria because of Ukraine. Russia and Iran are now in a weak position. One, because of Ukraine and the bad economy. And two, because of Israel and its success in fighting. Konstantin Kozhikov, deputy chairman of Russia's upper house of parliament, said, Syrians will have to cope with full-scale civil war alone. This was reported in the Interfax news agency. Syrian rebels announced on state television that they had ousted President Bashar Assad, eliminating a 50-year family dynasty in a lightning offensive that raises the specter of a new instability in the Middle East, gripped by war. Russia, a staunch Assad ally, intervened decisively in 2015 to prop him up during Syria's civil war, which began in 2011. Russian war bloggers have raised fears about the fate of two strategically important Russian military facilities in Syria. The Russian Foreign Ministry said that the Syrian President Bashar Assad had left his office and departed the country after giving orders that there be a peaceful handover of power. In a statement, the ministry said not to say where Assad was, and said Russia has not taken part in the talks around his departure. Quote, as a result of negotiations between Assad and a number of participants in the armed conflict on the territory of the Syrian Arab Republic, he decided to resign from the presidency and left the country, giving instructions for a peaceful transfer of power. Russia did not participate in these negotiations. That's the quote from the Foreign Ministry. And it continued, the Russian Federation is in contact with all the groups of Syrian opposition. It said Russia's military bases in Syria had been put on a state of high alert, but there was no serious threat to them at the current time. Hezbollah convoys have withdrawn from Syria and are going back into Lebanon. Qatar-based newspaper The New Arab reported all this information. The convoys, accompanied by heavy vehicles, followed Hezbollah forces' deployment in support of Assad's regime against advancing rebels' forces. So they are abandoning Syria right now. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad boarded a plane and left to an unknown destination. Two senior army officers familiar with the incident told Reuters that this was the case. There are also reports that his plane, while taking off, exploded. Nothing can be confirmed as of this taping. Iranian diplomats stationed at the embassy in Damascus have left Syria after the fall of the Assad regime, which they have supported, according to the report in the Saudi Arabian network, Al Arabiya. An official in Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps referred to the collapse of Assad regime, saying that, quote, "This is the fall of the Axis Berlin Wall," he said. Quote, again, "In 11 days, we lost everything we fought for 13 years. This is a devastating blow to Iran." Saudi television channel Al Hadath quoted the diplomatic source saying that, and I'm quoting here, "One of the possible destinations ousted Syrian President Bashar Assad could have reached is Belarus." The Saudi TV also reported that Israel attacked weapons depots and ground-based missiles in Syria. Other witnesses reported that Assad's plane blew up as he was taking off. We will soon see. This was what I was referring to in the earlier part of the show. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu hailed the ousting of Syria's Bashar al-Assad as a historic day that followed the blows delivered by Israel against Assad supporters, Iran and Hezbollah in Lebanon. On a visit to the area near the border with Syria, Israeli Prime Minister said that he had ordered Israeli forces to seize areas in the buffer zone to ensure Israel's security, saying, "We will not allow any hostile force to establish itself on our border." We've been thinking out loud about a lot today. Now that you know what I've been thinking, let me know what you're thinking. Email me at micah@jbstv.org. Tweet me at Micah Halpern. Tell me what you think, please. Before we end, let me leave you with one piquante piece of information. This next video is a lampoon of the ICC, the International Criminal Court, and its ridiculous arrest warrants against Israeli leaders. It was created by Sarai Givati. She plays all the roles in the video, and it's her voice and accent speaking in all the characters. The video begins with Bashar Assad's secretary calling the ICC and asking if he will be arrested if he travels. The ICC secretary says the butcher Assad should not worry. He will not get arrested because he has a double immunity. He's a Muslim and a dictator. The ICC will not issue an arrest warrant until he is dead, she says. She then calls the British and she tells them that they should honor the arrest warrant against Israeli Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu, and that they should worry because of the many jihadists growing in England. Finally, she's on the phone with the ICC prosecutor, Khan. He asks her to come to his office alone. That was funny because he's being investigated for sexually inappropriate behavior. Watch this very funny clip.
International Criminal Court. I'm calling from the Syrian President Bashar al-Assad office.
Why do you have the pleasure?
Mr. Assad heard about the Netanyahu arrest and he would like to check his status.
Oh, he has nothing to worry about. He's got double immunity. He's a dictator and a Muslim.
Are you sure?
Assad will get a warrant for his arrest only after he dies.
Are you serious?
Look at Hamas. We could have arrested Khalid Mash'al, who was alive, but we sent an arrest to Mohammed Deif.
Yo, I'm not joking.
Next word goes Sinwar, Nasrallah, and Bin Laden.
Shukran.
Have a nice terrorizing. Feel free to kill. Hello, Prime Minister Office. Yes, good morning. I'm just calling to make sure you're going to respect our objective and justified warrant against Israeli Prime Minister. Oh, it is unclear at the moment. Well, it looks like you have quite a few jihadists in your country. You know what they say about the jihadist problem. No, what? It doesn't disappear. It multiplies. And your Prime Minister will be subjected to an arrest warrant. We will take care of that immediately. Well done. Chief Prosecutor. Yes, I made sure to tell all the Europeans it's no more don't mess with the Zohan, it's don't mess with the jihad. Come to your office alone. Again. You know what? I have a bit of a cold.
I hope you enjoyed this funny clip. It's very insightful and hilarious. Thank you for thinking out loud with me, Micah Halpern. Let's think out loud again next week on JBS.